Well, I was just arrived in Hawaii. I had been in Hawaii for about 3 weeks or so, and I was getting a little frightened and frustrated, and I wanted to find out if there was a temple here. I had never been to a Hare Krishna temple, but I always wanted to go. And so I went to Manoa Valley. Someone said there was a temple in Manoa Valley. I walked there, and there was nothing. And then I went to Kalihi Valley, nothing. Then one day I saw a devotee in a dhoti walking, and I asked him if he was a Hare Krishna. He said, yes. I says, boy, I've been looking all over for you guys. He says, well, he says, our spiritual master is here. He says, why don't you come with me and you can see him? And I didn't know what a spiritual master was. So I followed him and I came into the temple. Prabhupada was here. He came into the temple room. Everybody fell to the floor. I was the only one standing because I didn't know why they were falling on the floor. And so it was just me and Prabhupada. We were the only ones upright. And he looked me dead in the eye. And all I could think of was, he's so familiar. Where have I seen him before? And he sat on the Vyasa-san and began to speak with this deep, beautiful, thunderous voice. And I couldn't make out much of what he was saying. I'd hear sex and I'd hear dog. And so I was thinking, maybe this is what I needed to hear. So I was very impressed, very impressed. The temple was packed with devotees. It was at night. And I had to go to work that evening. So when I went home, or went to work, that mantra was going through my head. I just couldn't get it out. So I came back the next day. I wanted to join. Because when I first saw Prabhupada, it was like all of the magic came back. I grew up Christian. My family was very close to the church. So we went to Sunday school, and we were always reading about angels appearing here and Jesus doing this and that. And I often wondered why, these things aren't going on anymore. But when I saw Prabhupada, it was like the magic was there. Here was a real mystic. And I could feel, I finally learned that it was called prema bhakti. I could feel this prema emanating from him. And it went right through me. I felt complete relief, complete security, complete contentment. I was very, very impressed. So I didn't have to ask questions. I knew this was the man. So for the rest of the week, I was struggling, trying to figure out how can I get into this movement. And I came back again, and they suggested that I go to Siddha Sarup. He was having a yoga retreat. And he says, there you can learn about the philosophy. So I took a flight to Kauai, beautiful island. And he had a retreat up in the mountains for about a week or so. And they invited me to live on their farm. And then I heard that Prabhupada was coming back to Hawaii. So I left Kauai and came back over. And this was the second time. This time I stayed in the temple while he was here. And I heard all of his lectures. The chanting was so blissful. He smelled like sandalwood and gardenias. And I was just so happy to be in his presence. So my life, that was the happiest time in my life. So I thought, success at last, I was a kitchen devotee. I hadn't been initiated yet. So I was cutting up potatoes and vegetables and always in bliss in the kitchen. Shruti Kirti came in. He was Prabhupada's servant. And he just took a liking to me. And he says, hey, you want to help me serve Prabhupada? And I said, sure. He says, so I want you to prepare his fruit plates. And he says, so Prabhupada is generally just eating fruits and some dab water. He says, so I want you to prepare that every day, So I would get all of the mangoes that came in. There were kichi fruit, papayas. I would cut them up nicely, arrange them on the dish, and get flowers, put flowers around the tray, the plate. And I would walk it up to this room. And Prabhupada would be sitting at this little foot table. And I would put his plate there, and he would say, Jai. He would raise his hands. He said, Jai, this is what I've been waiting for. I thought he was talking about me, but it was the food. I would sit it down, and he would begin to eat, and it was like a little innocent boy, although he was an elderly man, but somehow I had the feeling he was like just a little kid, you know, and it was very nice. So I would go on out of the room. The next day, before I came up, Srila Kirti came to me and said, Prabhupada wants you to pay your obeisances when you leave. And so the next day, I set his fruit plate up very nicely with flowers and everything, and I brought it up. He said Jai the same time, and I put it down. And so this time I remembered he wanted me to pay my obeisances, my obeisance. So I fell to the floor and just drew a blank. His presence was so overwhelming, and I was so happy, I couldn't remember the prayer. So I just stayed on the floor until I thought the prayer was over. I felt so embarrassed. But he didn't say anything, and I felt like this is a very kind-hearted man. Being in a black body, I could easily pick up when people are judging you by your physical presence. I never got that from Prabhupada. So I felt very, very safe. The next day, Srila Kirti came to me and said, there's some instructions I have for you. Prabhupada said that your pineapples that you cut are too sweet, and they should be tart. If they're sweet, then they're a little fermented. And then he said the dab water was good but cloudy. He said the dab water should be clear like water. And then the third instruction was the flowers. They're poisonous. I would put these oleanders around the plate, and none of us knew. We had all been in Hawaii for quite a while, and Prabhupada was visiting here, and he was the only one who knew that that flower was poisonous. So I stopped putting the flower on the plate. And so then I would come in, and this time I thought I did everything right. And so I asked him. I finally built up enough nerve to ask him, was everything okay? And he would bob his head and says, everything is fine, you know. So I felt so elated and happy. One other thing I didn't mention was that before I started making the plates, Srila Kirti warned me, because we had been trained, when you prepare food for Krishna, you don't taste anything. Your hands are clean, your mouth is clean, you just know what ingredients, how much to put in, everything. So I knew that. But he said, now you're serving Prabhupada, so you have to taste everything and make sure that it is, you know, proper. So I did, and I would use my own judgment, you know, as to how things tasted. But then he taught me some lessons. Another thing that I enjoyed very much being here in Hawaii, one of the advantages of being at this temple, is that because it's so small and Prabhupada liked to stay here long periods of time, we all got a chance to go on morning walks with him. So we would go to different beach parks. The weather had never been more beautiful here in Hawaii. It was almost as if the demigods were trying to please Prabhupada by making the Hawaii weather even better. So we'd go to these incredible beaches and we would walk. He was translating the 5th canto, which was basically the structure of the universe, the cosmology of Krishna. I would hear him speak about things that were so incredible and mystical. He had talked about a fish called the Timangila. He says it's so huge it can swallow a whale whole. And he says, and this rock, we were at a beach, and there was a huge rock island just outside of the beach, that was shaped like the Timangila. Had a huge bulbous head and then a little small section for the tail. We call that Rabbit Island. It's a huge island. But he said that is the size and shape of the Timangila. And we were just dumbfounded. We were thinking, man, this is incredible. So I wanted more. I wanted to hear more of these mystical things, you know. So he talked about the Golden Mountain and the ocean of milk and the ocean of sugar water. So I just immediately decided I've got to get this 5th canto. and peruse through it and find all this information. After about a year living here in Hawaii, I was interested in art, and I had been communicating with Radharani. I sent her some sketches, and she said that she would welcome me if I came to LA and work with the artist. So I immediately made that my goal. So I got permission from the temple here in Hawaii to go to LA. And I went there, met Radharani, and we got established there as one of the artists. So I would help with some of the paintings, doing a lot of the details. We all would do a group work on paintings. So one day, Prabhupada wanted to see just the artists, and he wanted us to bring our paintings. And at the time, I was working on a beautiful painting of Krishna under a beautiful tree with his flute and a cow. And I worked very hard on it. All the devotees thought it was very beautiful. So I thought, now I get to show this to Prabhupada. How fortunate. So we all came up to the Prabhupada's room in the Los Angeles temple with our paintings, and we all sat around. Prabhupada spoke a little bit about Krishna, and then we all took turns coming up to him with our paintings. I don't remember much what he said about any of the paintings of the other artists, but when I got up, he didn't even look at my painting. He was looking at me. And I just felt this powerful purging, and I just threw my head down. So then he looked back up. He said, "You are all doing paintings of Krishna standing by the Jamuna." He says, "Are you reading my books?" And he said, "If you read my books, you will find that Krishna is not just standing by the Jamuna. He is doing all kinds of fantastic things." He says, "So I want to see a book, just paintings of Krishna doing his pastimes. You flip a page and he's doing this, another page he's doing that." He says, "That is what I would like to see." He says, "Right now you all have come to me with these paintings and they're all similar." He says, "So read my books." So that was my instructions. I took that as my instructions from Prabhupada. Being here in Hawaii, I learned that we established the first Hare Krishna restaurant. Prabhupada wanted it called Govinda's. Before I even came to the temple, I was in Hawaii, and I found a neat little sandwich shop, and I went in. It was beautiful. I had wonderful pita bread, avocado, cheese sandwich, and they had some other nice things, smoothies. I found out that that was a Hare Krishna restaurant. Prabhupada asked about it while he was here. He wanted to know how was the restaurant doing. And they said, "Oh, it's doing fine, Prabhupada." He says, "So are they helping the temple?" And they says, "Well, you can speak with Tarun Kunti and Revati Ramana. They are running this thing." So Prabhupada had a meeting with them, and he wanted to know what was going on with the restaurant. So they explained that, "Well, Prabhupada, the restaurant's doing really nicely, but there are a lot of expenses, and so once we take care of all the expenses and buy food, there's not really a lot left, to give the temple," because he was concerned about that, if they were giving money to the temple, and they weren't. So Prabhupada made a solution. He said, "Okay, what we can do is, I understand that you, Tarun Kunti, your family is living in a condominium, and then Revati Ramana, you and your family are living in another condominium." He said, "These condominiums are large enough. The two of you could live in one condominium, and then the money you're spending on the other, you can give to the temple." They did not like that idea, and I think one of them said, "Prabhupada, we can't do that." So Prabhupada very sternly looked at them and said, "Then you've stolen my restaurant, and I want it back." Manaswi was the temple president at the time. He was a young Indian man who was running the temple here. And Manaswi decided to infiltrate the restaurant. So he sent me down. I was one of the new bhaktas. So he said, Howard, Bhakta Howard, you go down there and start helping out, washing dishes and stuff, you know, and let them know that this is our restaurant. So I was kind of like the pawn in this situation. And I went down, and they kind of treated me illy, you know, they knew what I was there for, you know, and they weren't very nice. But I didn't care. I was fulfilling the order of Prabhupada. And so I was there with my dhoti and tilak and everything, you know. I could see that Prabhupada was on a mission, and he was serious. It was no nonsense, but yet he was kind. He was not harsh. He was not condescending. He didn't make them feel bad. They had some kind of attachment that even Prabhupada could not shake. So that was when he got a little firm and let them know that you're stealing my temple, you're stealing my restaurant. And I thought that that was a good instruction for them. I learned from that point on that Prabhupada does chastise his disciples, but when he chastises them, it is not out of any type of dislike or hatred. He loved everyone, and he wanted us to do everything properly for Krishna. That was very important for him. So I took that instruction. Well, I think what stood out with Prabhupada was whenever I was in his presence, I was feeling something very intense, and I knew it was coming from him. Once, after a Sunday feast, I was kind of, it was a little lull, and so I came and sat on the stairway that came up to his room, and I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden it was like a blast of wind just came right through me. It came out of the room where Prabhupada was present, and it was like this breeze of ecstasy just came and went right through me. And I felt what I understood to be transcendental bliss. All of my cares and problems just went away. I could clap my heels together and do cartwheels. That's how I felt. And I knew that it was coming from him. So I've been around a lot of people, and I've gone to a lot of concerts, all these great rock stars, people that you admire. But when Prabhupada stepped out of the limousine or out of the airplane, anywhere, that prema bhakti just inundated the area. And it was very, very prominent. Some people saw auras, but I could feel that prema bhakti. And that's when I said, I will follow this man to the end. No one made me feel happy like he did. Je anilo